Have you ever felt like you weren't alone, even when there was no one else around? That strange sense that someone or something was watching you? It's a feeling that's hard to explain, but even harder to ignore. Before I go deeper into the story, welcome, and make sure to subscribe to the channel, Echoes of Nightmares, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the future scary tales. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button too. Also, leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from in the world. Now, back to my story. I remember it vividly. It wasn't something I read about or heard in passing. It happened to me. A few years ago, I enrolled at a university known for its academic prestige and its history of unexplained disappearances. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to the rumors. To me, they were just ghost stories, campus legends meant to spook freshmen during orientation. But the truth, as I would come to find out, was far worse. In 2010, a student vanished without a trace from the university's library. Her name was Emma Sullivan, and she had been working late on a paper. When the cleaning staff arrived the next morning, her things were still there. Her books, her bag, and even her laptop. Still on, the cursor blinking on an empty document. The only clue she left behind? A single page torn from a notebook, with the words, "It follows," written in shaky handwriting. Emma was never seen again. I didn't think much about Emma's story when I first moved into my dorm. It felt too distant, too removed from my own reality. But that changed the night I heard the knock on my window. The window of my fourth floor room. That's when it all began. When I moved into the dorm, the rain hadn't stopped for days. The sky was a flat, gray sheet, and the air carried that damp, cold weight that sinks into your bones. It was late September, and I was just beginning my first semester at Crestfall University, a place as renowned for its academic legacy as it was for its strange, unsettling past. My room was on the fourth floor of Hollister Hall, one of the oldest buildings on campus. It had been built in the late 1800s, originally as a boarding school, before becoming part of the university. Its age showed in every detail. The floors creaked with every step. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, faint water stains trailing down from the ceiling. The hallway lights flickered constantly, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and shift when you weren't looking directly at them. The first thing I noticed was the smell, a damp, musty odor like wet leaves and rotting wood. The kind of smell that lingers, no matter how many windows you open. I thought it was just the rain soaking into the old building. But it wasn't just the rain. My first night in Hollister Hall was uneventful, at first. I spent hours unpacking, arranging my books and clothes, trying to make the room feel a little less like something out of a horror movie. I ignored the rain tapping against the window and the occasional groan of the old pipes. I told myself it was just the building settling. But as the night went on, I started noticing oddities. Around midnight, I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through class schedules, when I heard it for the first time. A light tapping sound coming from my window. It was soft, barely audible over the rain, but steady enough to grab my attention. I remember glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see raindrops sliding down the glass. But there was something off. The sound wasn't random, like the rain hitting the window pane. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone was knocking. I got up and walked to the window, pulling back the thin curtain. All I could see was the storm, rain streaming down the glass, trees swaying violently in the wind. No sign of anyone outside. I brushed it off, convincing myself that it was just a trick of the storm, and went back to my desk. That should have been the end of it. But the tapping wasn't the only thing that night. It started small, a book slipping off the desk, my lamp flickering. I told myself it was just the wind or the power surges common in old buildings like this. But then there were the whispers. They were so faint at first that I thought I imagined them. A soft murmur, like the sound of a distant conversation, except it was coming from inside my room. I turned off my music, sat still, and listened. The sound stopped. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just tired, but that didn't explain the feeling that someone was there, watching. The next morning, I tried to laugh it off. First night jitters, an overactive imagination. That's all it was. But when I went to grab my bag, I noticed something strange. It wasn't where I'd left it. I was sure I had placed it by the door, but now it was on the desk chair, as if someone had moved it. It wasn't just the bag. A couple of books I had stacked neatly the night before were now scattered on the floor. Again, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had been more tired than I thought. Maybe I moved them and didn't remember. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. By the second night, the storm had grown worse. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the rain fell in heavy sheets. I tried to focus on studying, blocking out the sounds with headphones, but it didn't help. I kept feeling it, the sense of being watched. And then, just like the night before, the tapping started. It was louder this time, more deliberate. A pattern of 3 knocks, a pause, and then 2 more. I froze, my headphones slipping off as I stared at the window. My heart pounded, and my mouth went dry. Slowly, I got up and walked over. My hands trembled as I pulled the curtain aside. The rain distorted the view outside, but I could swear I saw something. A figure, standing in the shadows just beyond the edge of the building's light. When I blinked, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next few nights were worse. The tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. Each time it was the same pattern, 3 knocks, a pause, and then 2 more. I would wake up to find things out of place. Books I hadn't touched lying open on the floor, my chair turned toward the window, as if someone had been sitting there. By the 4th night, I could no longer convince myself it was all in my head. I needed answers. I started asking around, hoping someone else had experienced the same things. Most of the students I talked to just laughed it off, saying Hollister Hall was notorious for scaring new residents. It's just old pipes and creaky floors, they'd say. But a few gave me a different answer. One girl, Emily, seemed reluctant to talk. But after some coaxing, she told me about Rebecca, a student who lived in Hollister Hall 15 years ago. She disappeared during a storm, just like this, Emily said, glancing nervously out the window. They say she was last seen on the 4th floor. No one knows what happened to her, but some people claim they still hear her voice. Others say they've seen her. I pressed her for more details, but she shook her head. Just don't stay up too late, she said before walking away. Her words only made me more determined to find out the truth. That night, I stayed in the library, digging through old newspaper archives and student records. What I found sent chills down my spine. Rebecca Miller, a 20-year-old junior, vanished on a stormy night in October 15th years ago. She had been studying in her room when her roommate went out for a late-night class. When the roommate returned, Rebecca was gone. Her desk lamp was still on, her books neatly arranged, and the window wide open, even though her room was on the 4th floor. Police found no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no clues. The only thing out of place was a message, written in condensation on the window. It follows. Rebecca's case was never solved. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I read, the more I realized Rebecca wasn't the only one. Over the decades, several students had disappeared from Hollister Hall. Different floors, different circumstances, but always during a storm. When I returned to my room that night, I felt a new kind of fear. I locked the door, drew the curtains tight, and tried to sleep. But the storm outside seemed louder than ever, the rain hammering against the window. And then, just as I started to drift off, I heard it. 3 knocks, a pause, 2 more. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the window, waiting for something to happen. The knocks came again, louder this time. Slowly, I got up and walked toward the window. My heart pounded as I reached out to pull the curtain aside. And there it was. The words "help me" written in the condensation on the glass. I stumbled back, my hands shaking. The room felt colder, the air heavy and suffocating. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that it was just the rain, but deep down, I knew better. I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, when I woke up, I found something new. Wet footprints leading from the window to the foot of my bed. That day, I decided to document everything. I set up my laptop to record at night, hoping to catch whatever was happening. The next morning, I played back the footage. At first, it was just the usual sounds. Rain against the window, the occasional creak of the floorboards. But then, around 3 a.m., the screen flickered, and there it was, a shadow, moving across the room, pausing by my desk, then turning toward me. The video cut to static, and when it returned, the shadow was gone. But on my desk, where I had left my notebook, there was now a single word written in jagged letters: run. At this point, I wasn't sleeping at all. Every night brought something new, more whispers, more strange movements in the room. I started to feel like I was losing my mind, so I decided to document everything. I set up my phone to record video and placed a voice recorder on my desk. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. The first night I recorded, the whispers were louder. They weren't just random sounds anymore. They were words. Faint, broken words like someone struggling to speak. Don't let them. Take me again. The voice was so faint that I had to play it back over and over, each time feeling the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't sleep after that. The second night, the storm outside was worse than ever. The wind howled, and the rain pounded against the glass like it was trying to break through. I was sitting at my desk, flipping through old notes, when I noticed something in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was just the shadows cast by the flickering light, but then I realized it wasn't moving with the storm. It was moving independently. I turned my head slowly toward the mirror hanging on the closet door. There, in the reflection, was someone standing behind me. I froze. I couldn't breathe. The figure was blurry, distorted by the dim light, but it was unmistakable. Someone was there. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Nothing but the sound of the storm. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but then I found the notebook. I was looking for something under my bed, an old textbook I'd kicked under there, and my hand brushed against something strange. When I pulled it out, it was an old, worn notebook. The cover was torn, the pages yellowed with age. Inside were journal entries, written in a rushed, panicked hand. The entries were dated 15 years ago. It was Rebecca's notebook. She wrote about feeling like she was being watched, about the shadows that moved at night. One entry read, "It's not just the shadows. They're watching me, waiting for me. I can feel them everywhere." Another said, "I told them what I saw, but no one believes me. They think I'm crazy, but it's real. I know it's real." The last entry was the most chilling. "They're coming for me. I can't stop them. If anyone finds this, don't let them take you too." I showed the notebook to my friends the next day, desperate for someone to believe me. But they just laughed. "It's probably just a prank," one of them said. "Someone's trying to freak you out." But I knew it wasn't a prank. The handwriting, the details, it all matched the records I'd found about Rebecca. And the things I was experiencing, they weren't a coincidence. That night, I felt more alone than ever. The storm was relentless, and the air in my room felt heavy, suffocating. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I felt it. Something grabbed my leg. It was cold and firm like a hand. I screamed and kicked, scrambling to turn on the light, but there was nothing there. Just the blankets, twisted and damp, as if something had been holding on to them. That's when I heard her voice, clear, unmistakable, and coming from right next to me. "It wasn't my fault," she cried, over and over. It wasn't my fault. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her presence, the room growing colder with every word. I stumbled out of bed, shaking, and turned toward the desk. The shadows in the room began to shift, pooling together in the corner. Slowly, they took shape, a tall, thin figure with hollow, glowing eyes. It didn't move. It just stood there, pointing at Rebecca's notebook on the desk. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. I don't remember much after that. Just the storm, the shadows, and Rebecca's voice. I stayed awake until dawn, clutching the notebook like it was the only thing keeping me safe. When the sun finally rose, the room was silent again. But I knew it wasn't over. Whatever had taken Rebecca was still here, and it was waiting for me. The notebook became my lifeline. Every night, I pored over Rebecca's entries, hoping to find some clue, some way to stop whatever was happening. But the more I read, the worse it got. Rebecca had been unraveling long before she disappeared. Her entries described strange dreams, shadows chasing her, voices calling her name. She wrote about waking up with bruises she couldn't explain, about feeling something watching her constantly. Then I found the most disturbing entry. It was hidden in the back, scrawled in shaky handwriting. They've been here longer than we know. They feed on fear, and they never stop. I've seen them. They're in the walls, the mirrors, the storms. If you're reading this, they've already found you. That was when I realized Rebecca wasn't the first. I went back to the library and searched deeper into the university's history. Hollister Hall had always been a problem. Decades ago, it was a boarding house. Residents reported strange noises, objects moving on their own, and unexplained disappearances. In 1972, 3 students vanished within the span of a single month. In 1986, a resident assistant claimed to see shadows crawling on the walls before quitting abruptly. And then there was Rebecca in 2010. The pattern was undeniable. Every few years, someone would disappear, always during a storm, always without a trace. And now it was happening again. Things in my room escalated. The whispers grew louder. The shadows became more distinct. I felt them pressing against me, brushing past me, but when I turned, there was nothing. One night, I woke up to find my bed surrounded by wet footprints. They circled the bed, leading to my desk, then back to the window. I turned on the light, trembling, and froze. On the window, written in foggy letters, were the words, "You're next." I screamed and ran out of the room, banging on my neighbors' doors. But when they came in to look, the words were gone. The footprints were gone. They thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but I knew what I saw. I tried to leave. I packed my things and told myself I would go home, drop out, anything to get away. But the storm was unrelenting. Roads were flooded, buses canceled, and every time I tried to step outside, I felt this weight, like something was physically holding me back. That night, I barricaded the door and stayed awake, clutching Rebecca's notebook. I kept every light on, every corner of the room illuminated. Around midnight, the lights started to flicker. Then they went out completely. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke up, it was still dark. The rain had stopped, and the room was eerily silent. The notebook was gone. I searched everywhere, under the bed, in the closet, even the hallway, but it had vanished. Then I saw it, on the window, written in large, jagged letters. "They're here." Before I could react, I heard it, a voice, low and raspy, whispering directly into my ear. "Run." The next thing I remember is waking up in the infirmary. My roommate had found me unconscious on the floor, clutching my blankets. They said I was screaming when they found me, but I don't remember any of it. The school dismissed everything as stress. They offered counseling, medication, even a different dorm, but I didn't take it. I left that day. I don't know what happened to Rebecca or the others or why I was spared. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice again, faint and desperate. Don't let them take you too. And when it rains, I still feel like I'm being watched. Have you ever felt like you weren't alone, even when you were? What do you think? Was Rebecca trying to save me, or was she part of something far beyond my understanding? And what about the dorm itself? Do you think it's haunted, cursed, or something worse? If you found yourself in my position, stuck in a storm, haunted by shadows and voices, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories. And if you want more stories that will keep you awake at night, don't forget to subscribe. Because the nightmares, they're only beginning.